You're now listening to the Adiel Gorel Show. Each episode I'll bring you the latest news from my discussions with top health and wellness experts so that you can bring yourself into better health. Today on the Adiel Gorel Show.
Just take a deep breath. Should really in some ways be hold your breath a little while. Right.
That's what Alicia Moret, who is a Stanford doctor, she now works at Southern Methodist University, had found is a lot of people with anxiety and panic, they have this very low threshold of CO2. So when you breathe too much, you offload too much CO2 because they developed this way of breathing because they associated a higher CO2 level with panic, because the trigger for breathing is not oxygen, it is CO2. So right now, if you exhale, hold your breath, and you feel that need to breathe, that is caused by an increase of CO2. So these people with anxiety and panic don't want that feeling because it reminds them of a panic attack. So they walk around, and when they feel the CO2 going up, they go, guess what happens? They have a panic attack or an asthma attack. So by simply teaching them, the only thing she did is she had them slow down their breathing whenever they felt a panic attack or an anxiety attack come on. And something like 50 to 60% of her patients within the first 2 months had zero panic attacks. Within 9, don't quote me on these exact numbers, but they were extraordinary. Within, I think, 9 to 10 months, 0 were having panic attacks. Just by controlling your breathing. And again, this is not a placebo. This is a physiological function. You're controlling your breathing, increasing your CO2. It's going to be able to relax you and abate that attack.
You said our thoughts, of course, affect our entire physiology. And one of the ways you demonstrated it is you said, look what happens when you're in bed at night. You're dreaming. You're laying there. You're just laying in bed. But because of the thoughts, because of the brain activity, you could sweat, you could jump, you could jerk, your whole physiology is incredibly strongly affected by your thinking. That's a great example.
You know, there's the very famous and popular movie, The Matrix, is a great depiction of this. You know, especially the scene, and I'm assuming a lot of people have seen this, almost everyone has seen it. Yes. The scene where Morpheus is training Neo to fight, and Neo gets plugged into this like fight simulator, and they're fighting, and of course Morpheus wins. Then they come out of the simulation, and Neo's like bleeding. You know, and his tongue is bleeding, his mouth is bleeding. And he's like, I thought this wasn't real. We were like and then Morpheus says the very famous line, the mind makes it real, right? The mind makes it real. So just like in a nightmare, let's say you're having a nightmare that maybe you're being chased by a bear and it's about to jump on you. And you wake up, your heart's beating faster than it would be if you just ran the marathon. Right? And you're breathing like you're about to die, which in your dream you almost did. You're perspiring like you just worked out for an hour on the treadmill. Now, you were actually comfortably tucked away in your bed. Right? Everything was fine. Your body should be at its most relaxed state right now. But the mind made it so real that your entire physiology and biology went completely berserk. Right? All the stress hormones just like completely fired away. And it's just like, boom, you wake up thinking that was just like the worst thing ever. So what happens up here translates straight all the way down to our toes. And so how do we manage our mind and emotions and stress? It's by learning to train this. Stopping the horrible negative thoughts that come in, letting them sit there, letting them replay 25 times or 2,500 times, because we cause ourselves so much stress. If something happened a year ago that caused us anxiety, okay, that happened a year ago. From a year ago to now, how many times have we replayed that and caused ourselves anxiety? Oh my gosh, 10 times, 20 times, 50 times the amount of anxiety than the anxiety the person caused us when they actually said something bad. So most of our stress is literally, I feel, self-induced because we don't know how to press pause on the thought process.
Well, I mean, that goes back to the Mark Twain saying, he says, my life was full of horrible events and terrible trouble, most of which didn't happen.
Yeah, right. Like, don't we blow things out of proportion in our mind? We like, oh, what if this happens, and this happens? Oh my God, how am I going to survive? But none of it's happened. So just chill out.
But I really like what you said. This is really, really powerful. Somebody really hurt us in a way that was very traumatic last year. That was a suffering right in the moment. What you said is so true. We have induced that same suffering 50 more times. Why is it that, like a magnet, I hark back to the 1 and not to the 99?
It's a 1.0 default operating system problem for all of us, myself included. It's called the negativity bias, and it's the bad is stronger than good in the brain. So when something bad happens to you, your brain doesn't pay like a little bit more attention to it, pays a ton more attention to it. It'll obsess about it, ruminate about it. It'll go over and over and over and over that thing, that one thing when 99% was good or positive. It's the root of our collective discontent, actually. And to override, again, thinking neuroplasticity here, right? To change. So basically, I'm going to use your language with the Teflon and I'm going to add Velcro. Negativity is like Velcro for the brain, and positivity is like Teflon for the brain. It just slips right through. Positive, you watch a beautiful sunset, or you have a lovely conversation with your significant other, or you know, whatever it is, and it doesn't stick the same way that negativity tends to stick. You don't have to do a lot for negative information to kind of get in there and really lodge itself. So the question becomes naturally, from a brain hacking or rewiring perspective, how do you flip those? How do you make positive information like Velcro for the brain and negative information like Teflon? It's a Herculean shift. It's a big shift. It really hurts when people are critical, you know? And so, but there's a few cute kind of tips or tools here. One is savoring. So this is research by Rick Hansen at UC Berkeley, and what he's found and is a strong advocate of is taking at least 10 seconds to savor positive things when they happen to you. So I've got a 7-year-old and an 8-month-old. So I've got all these little moments in my day with little people that are just beautiful. You know, like when my little boy is crawling all over the place right now, and he's you know, both of them are obsessed with mastery. Like everything is about learning and trying this new thing, and you know, in totally different ways. But like, there's so much to celebrate. There's just so much to celebrate. But life is also stressful, and there's a lot on my plate, and I've got a lot going on, and like I have a choice every day. And I know this sounds almost cliche, right? But there is the moment, the moment of choice and the rewiring happening really is in these micro moments. So if my boy, and again, he's not walking yet, but he's crawling. So if he pulls himself up on the couch and like stands up by himself, which he's now doing occasionally, if I celebrate with them and kind of get down on his level and we kind of do this little thing, that would be an example of savoring. But if I'm got my eye on the dishes because we just finished dinner and I'm the dish guy in our family, right? And I've got to like do the, you know, this task orientation. It's, you know, Chad actually often will describe it as human doings versus human beings. The doing orientation will pull me out of savoring. And the being and the doing, it's not that system is bad. It's a dopamine system. Dopamine drives us to do. But the savoring system, the here and now neurochemicals, the H and N's, sometimes they're called, which is serotonin, endorphins, endocannabinoids, and oxytocin. Those are the ones that make us feel happy. They make us feel calm, that make us feel peaceful, that make us feel contented, in these moments. And to amplify those, to savor and then allow that to sink in, and even in visualizing it sinking into your brain doesn't take more than 10 seconds or so. Every time you have a positive moment throughout your day is actually going to start rewiring your brain for happiness instead of anxiety.
How does stress figure into the conglomerate of toxins that we are going to be talking about?
Yes, this is such a good topic, and I love to go back to it many, many times. Our brain actually have an old brain part, the midbrain, then the new brain, okay? The midbrain has been around for 40 million years. That's a reptile. You've seen the iguanas. You see how they react to shadows. They're very reactive. Our brain has 40 million years of the reactive response, okay? The new brain is our sage brain. We have spiritual calling. We have love. We have consciousness, compassion. We have, many things that's developed from the new brain, which is incredible. That make human being very different from the iguana, right? From the reptile. But the problem is our response to stress is through a system called the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system is not controlled by consciousness. So we have, Dalai Lama, the yogis, they all meditate every day. Why? Because they understand they all have a reptile brain that react to things, you see? But the problem is our brain, the new part of the brain, which is 4 million years old, is pretty old too. It has not been updated when it comes down to stress. Stress will trigger the same autonomic response between a regular person to Dalai Lama, okay? I'm just saying that because that's the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system sends stress, increase sympathetic response, which is heart rate elevation, palpitation, blood pressure, and their vessel constricted, and then so they're ready to fight and flight. Also, all the other things, the parasympathetic, which is digestion, increase in growth hormone, testosterone, DHEA. Those things are, for life. Those for life things are no longer important. The stress is becoming number one. That's why the reactive patterns of things are very difficult to talk yourself out of it. Now, right now, there's a huge movement about breathing, right? Everybody talk about breathing, brain training. It's really try to train our old brain into a new brain. Because modern life stress, Adiel, it's more like in the past, if we're isolated in the mountains, we may hear bad news, every month, right? Maybe somebody has a little horse come in and say, hey, did you hear our president is doing this? Well, today is every day, every time you open the phone, you have stressful news. Your neighbor gets diagnosis of cancer, your loved one. So it's a stress frequency is increased. Our brain doesn't know that. Our brain, the reactive part, thought it's only just once in the, every month. So we are into this sympathetic overdrive on the daily basis. Over time, it become a habit. So when it become a habit, it's very hard to change, right? You can't change autonomic nervous system, period. And suddenly your brain is stuck. We're stuck in the stress mode. So when you go to a party, the only time to not to be stuck is to drink a bunch of alcohol or smoke tons of weed, right? So, but that's not the conscious enjoyment of life. It's really get yourself all drugged up. So that's really the challenge. But we are finding good things. if you have download your sympathetic on a daily basis, okay, not just when you have time, if you can do it every day, something you love to do, you actually can train your brain into a more sympathetic, parasympathetic balance.
What are the physical impacts on the body that you found that laughter,
Yeah,
laughter has?
it's a great question. And the fact that you're asking the question, an educated guy, the fact that I ask and most educated people don't know the answer is really part of the sadness. It shows you that we are run by drug companies. Big Pharma does not want us to know that this laughter exists as a healing modality. It really, really is. It's no BS. So your skin, your heart's pumping. Just think about your mind. You go to the meaninglessness of something you're putting so much fear and attention onto. You realize after you laugh, I do these guided laughations and chuckle chatters, and afterwards I go, wow, I made a big deal out of nothing. And that also includes mentally when you're dealing with an illness. It's a lot of times the illness is a physical manifestation of something that's in your mind. And it's not like you're making it up. It really is happening. But so much of illness does start in the mind. And what does laughter do? It creates this whole other space. It shifts into a different state of consciousness. And it's been proven how many medical benefits happen from laughing. And yet it's the last thing we do.
Thanks for joining me today. Click the subscribe button for more video. Got a question or comment? I love questions and comments. Leave yours below. And here's another video you've got to see.